I had a stroke on a Wednesday morning in October, and the people I'd spent 53 years loving couldn't find a single afternoon to sit beside me while I relearned how to hold a pen. Let me give you the number first, because numbers are honest in a way that people aren't. 22 days. That's how long I was in the rehabilitation unit at St. Agatha's Medical Center, first in the acute stroke ward, where they monitored my blood pressure every 4 hours through the night, then in the neuro rehab wing, where a physical therapist named Celeste spent 45 minutes each morning, helping me walk in a straight line like I was learning to do it for the first time. 22 days. My husband and Victor called on day 3 to ask where I kept the insurance documents. My daughter Simone texted on day 7 to say she was thinking of me with a little heart emoji. My son-in-law Brett never reached out at all. I want you to hold that number for a moment before I go any further. 22 days is a long time. When you're lying in a hospital bed, watching the ceiling and wondering whether the words you're searching for are going to come back to you, or whether they're just gone now, dissolved somewhere in the clot that had worked its way through my brain on a quiet Wednesday morning when I was standing at my kitchen counter making oatmeal. My name is Loretta. I'm 54 years old, and this is the story of how I finally learned the difference between a family that loves you and a family that uses you. And what I did when I finally, fully understood which one I had. It started the way these things always start. Ordinary. Tuesday night I'd been on the phone with my daughter for 40 minutes while she talked through whether she and Brett should refinance their house. I gave her my honest opinion. I listened. I said the things a mother says. I went to bed at 10:30 and woke up Wednesday morning and started the coffee and got out the oatmeal, and then something shifted behind my left eye, in a way I can only describe as a door closing very quickly, and I was on the kitchen floor, with my cheek against the cold tile, and no clear idea how I'd gotten there. My neighbor Claudette found me. She'd come over to return a casserole dish from 2 weeks before, knocked, heard nothing, and had the good sense to look through the side window before going home. She called 911. She rode with me in the ambulance, even though she had a dentist appointment she'd been waiting 3 months for. She canceled it without me even knowing she'd done so. I didn't know all of this until later. What I knew in the moment was fluorescent lights and people speaking in calm, careful voices, and the specific terror of trying to say my own name and hearing the word come out shaped wrong. From the ambulance, I managed to get a message to Victor. Not a call, I couldn't manage a call, but a text that Claudette helped me send because my right hand wasn't cooperating the way it should. It said I had a stroke, on my way to St. Agatha's. Please come. He responded 40 minutes later with, "Oh my God, I'm in a meeting. I'll try to get there tonight." He didn't come that night. He came the following afternoon, stayed for about an hour, and spent a significant portion of that hour asking the attending physician whether my condition was going to affect our finances. I watched him do this from the bed. I was right there. I watched him ask the doctor about long-term care costs and insurance coverage, while I sat 3 feet away with a blood pressure cuff on my arm and a speech therapist's worksheet on my tray table. That was day 2. I called Simone from the hospital phone, because my cell was still in my purse somewhere, and my right hand was still unreliable. She answered on the 4th ring. She said all the right things in the way that people do when they're saying the right things, but not actually present inside them. She said, "Mom, that's terrifying, I'm so sorry." She said, "We'll figure it out." She said, "Keep me posted, keep me posted." I'm not sure why that particular phrase keeps finding its way into moments like these. Like the person on the other end of the line has somewhere more important to be but is willing to receive updates at their convenience. Simone lived 40 minutes away. Brett worked from home. They had 2 kids in school, yes, but schools have pickup hours. There were 45 minutes in the day that belonged to no one in particular, that could have been spent sitting beside me in a hospital room. I'm not asking for much when I say that. I'm asking for the amount of time it takes to drive to a drive-thru and eat in a parking lot. They came once. On day 9, they brought flowers. The pre-wrapped grocery store kind with the little plastic water vials on the stems, and stayed for about 90 minutes, most of which Brett spent on his phone in the hallway. Simone sat with me and we talked, or tried to. My words were still coming back to me slowly, like they were traveling from somewhere very far away, And I could see Simone working hard not to look uncomfortable when I lost a word mid-sentence and had to stop and breathe and find it again. They left by 4 o'clock to get home before the kids got off the bus. Victor came twice total. Once on day 2 when he asked the doctor about insurance. Once on day 14 when he brought me a change of clothes that I hadn't asked for, and most of which were the wrong season for the weather outside. What filled those 22 days instead? If you're wondering, was Celeste the physical therapist who celebrated loudly and genuinely when I walked the full length of the hallway without drifting left? It was a night nurse named George who figured out on day 5 that I liked decaf tea before bed and started leaving a cup outside my door without me having to ask. It was Claudette, my neighbor Claudette, who had canceled her dentist appointment, who came on days 1, 4, 8, 12 and 19 with things she'd quietly researched I might need. Large print word puzzles for my speech exercises, a soft wrist brace for the right hand. A paperback novel she'd heard was good for people relearning to read, because the sentences were short and the paragraphs breathed. Claudette lived 3 houses down and had known me for 11 years, and she outshowed my entire immediate family 5 times over. I cried in that hospital, but not from the stroke. The stroke I could handle, or at least I was handling it, day by day, one hallway walk at a time. I cried because there's something particular about being sick and alone that doesn't just hurt in the moment. It teaches you something. It adjusts your understanding of the world in a way that doesn't fully adjust back. You lie there in the quiet and you think about all the years of showing up. Every school event and every crisis and every phone call at 10:30 about mortgage refinancing. And you realize with a clarity that is genuinely painful that the account you thought was balanced has been running in one direction for a very long time. I was discharged on a Thursday afternoon. Claudette picked me up. She had baked a small lemon cake and put it on my kitchen counter before I got home, and the fact that someone had been in my house making it clean and welcoming while I was gone nearly broke me open in the best possible way. Victor was home when I arrived. He was in the living room watching a college football game. He said, "Hey, you're back," in the same tone you'd use to greet someone who'd gone to the grocery store. I want to be fair here, because I've spent a lot of my life trying to be fair even when it costs me something. Victor and I had been married for 27 years. He was not, in the way that dramatic stories need a villain, a cartoonishly bad person. He was the kind of person who had simply gotten very comfortable treating my presence as a given, and my absence as an inconvenience to be managed. I had allowed that to happen. I want to own my part of it. But allowing something to happen and deserving what comes from it are not the same thing, and I didn't deserve what came next. 6 weeks after I came home, I got a call from Simone. Not a text. An actual call which should have told me something. She opened with pleasantries, asked how my recovery was going. I said it was going. Then she got to the part that had actually prompted the call. "So Brett and I have been talking," she said, "and we've found this incredible vacation home in Asheville. It's gorgeous, Mom, like a full mountain house, 5 bedrooms, and we want to do a big family Thanksgiving there this year. The whole family. We're thinking we'd rent it for the week and it's a little pricey, but the memories, you know?" I waited. "It's $3,800 a week," she said, "and we were hoping you and Dad might be able to help cover it as kind of a gift to the whole family. Since you both always say you want everyone together." I put the phone down on the counter for a moment and looked out the window at the backyard, where the oak tree I'd planted the year we moved in had lost most of its leaves. I picked the phone back up. "How much?" I said. "We were thinking maybe $1,900 each. You and Dad?" There was a part of me that wanted to say all of it. Everything. All 22 days of it in one long torrent, the empty chair and the 4-hour blood pressure checks. And Claudette's lemon cake and the word puzzles. And Victor asking the doctor about insurance while I sat 3 feet away. I started composing it in my head right there, standing at my kitchen counter where I'd been making oatmeal the morning this had all begun. I didn't say any of it. I said, "I'll think about it and let you know." Then I went to my laptop, opened up my Venmo account, and sent Simone $1. In the memo I put, "For the memories. I want to tell you what happened in the next 12 hours because it was genuinely something." My phone started vibrating at 9 in the evening, which was when Simone apparently checked her Venmo. 3 calls in rapid succession. I let them go to voicemail, then a text. Mom, what is this? Then another. Are you serious right now? Then one from Brett, which was notable because Brett had not communicated with me in any direct way since before my hospitalization. Simone is really upset. Can you please just explain what's going on? Explain what's going on. That phrase is doing a lot of work. Victor came into the kitchen where I was sitting with my tea and said Simone had called him. He looked confused in the specific way he looks, as when he's not sure whether to be annoyed or concerned, and is waiting to see which one would be more convenient. She says you sent her $1. I did, I said. Why? I picked up my tea. I said I gave her the same amount of effort she gave me when I was in the hospital. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he went back to the living room. I'm not sure what I expected from that exchange. Some acknowledgement maybe, some flicker of recognition. He came, sat with it for half a second, and decided it was easier to go back to whatever was on television. It was Simone who called back that night, the fourth attempt, and something in me, some small stubborn corner that hadn't fully learned to protect itself yet, answered. She was not yelling. Simone has never been a yeller. She was doing something I find almost more exhausting, which is speaking in a very careful, controlled voice that is performing calm while communicating fury. I don't understand why you're making this into something, she said. We were trying to plan something nice for the family and you're turning it into an attack. I was in the hospital for 22 days, I said, quiet on the other end. I know, Mom. It was a really hard time for all of us. A hard time for all of you, I repeated. Not a question, just the words back to her so she could hear them. You said yourself you wanted your space. You said the visitors stressed you out. I stopped. I said that very slowly, in the careful voice I'd been practicing with my speech therapist. I never said that, Mom. You told Dad you needed to rest, and that you didn't want a lot of people coming in and out. I had told Victor in our conversation on day 2 that I was tired and that the afternoons were hard for me. I had said that in the context of explaining why I'd been asleep when he called. I had not said I didn't want visitors. I had in fact said the opposite. Multiple times. On days 4 and 8 and 11, I had explicitly told both Victor and Simone that the loneliness was the hardest part, and that I would love to see them when they could manage it. Someone had taken half a sentence and built an entire excuse out of it. I told Simone I'd talk to her later and I ended the call. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that. The oak tree outside had gone completely bare by then. I thought about what it means to have something taken from you twice. First the visits themselves, and then the right to have been hurt by their absence. To have your own experience, quietly repackaged as your choice, so that no one has to feel responsible for what they didn't do. There was a family group text chain. Victor's sister Barb ran it. Mostly photos of grandchildren and recipe links, and the occasional announcement about birthday plans. I had been on it for years in the comfortable peripheral way of someone who reads without contributing much. I knew from a comment Barb had made at Christmas the year before that she'd been meaning to come see me during my hospital stay, but had heard I wasn't up for visitors. Heard from whom, I had wondered at the time. Now I knew. I typed a message into the group chain. I kept it short because short is harder to dismiss. I said, I've become aware that some family members were told I didn't want visitors during my hospitalization in October. I want to clarify that was never true. I was alone for 22 days and would have welcomed anyone who came. I asked for company multiple times. I'm sharing this because I think everyone deserves to know the truth. And because I'm done carrying a version of events that wasn't mine to carry. I put the phone face down on the table and went to make tea. What came back in the next hour was, from what Barb told me later, something close to a reckoning. Barb herself called me that same night, not to weigh in on who was right or wrong, but just to say she was so sorry, that she had wondered at the time, that it hadn't sat right with her, and she'd felt guilty for not pushing back. She said she'd visited her own mother every single day during a hip replacement, and she'd assumed I was different, that I was more private, and she wished she'd trusted her instinct. 3 other family members reached out in the following days. Victor's cousin Philip, who I'd always liked but rarely saw, sent a long message saying he'd been worried during my recovery, and that he'd been told directly by Victor that I had asked for privacy and not to call. Victor's Aunt Shirley sent a card, a physical card hand-addressed, that arrived 4 days later and said simply, I would have been there. I want you to know that. Victor's reaction to all of this was to tell me I had made things very awkward at the holidays. I told him that awkward was a pretty manageable consequence for the truth. I want to tell you what happened with Simone and the Asheville house, because I think the shape of it matters. She didn't get the vacation rental, not because of me, not directly. I didn't campaign against it or make any calls, but Barb's daughter, who'd been planning to contribute, quietly bowed out. Philip, who'd said maybe, said no. The rental that had been budgeted around family contributions fell apart. When the contributions didn't materialize, and they ended up doing a much smaller Thanksgiving at their own house, with their immediate family, and Victor's sister and her husband, I spent that Thanksgiving with Claudette and her daughter's boyfriend and a dog named Professor, who kept stealing rolls off the counter. It was the best Thanksgiving I'd had in years. We watched the parade in the morning and played cards in the afternoon, and nobody talked about mortgage refinancing or Venmo or awkwardness at the holidays. Claudette made a sweet potato casserole that I'm still thinking about. Honestly, I've been asked since all of this whether the dollar was the right move, whether it was petty, whether it made things harder than they needed to be. And I want to answer that honestly, the way I've been trying to be honest through this whole thing. The dollar wasn't about the money, not even slightly. Simone didn't need $1,900 from me for a vacation rental in the mountains. What she needed, or thought she needed, was for me to keep behaving the way I always had, which was to absorb whatever was given to me, say thank you, and keep showing up. The dollar was me saying, in the clearest language I had available, the math has changed. I am done funding a relationship that does not run in both directions. I don't have a tearful reconciliation to offer you at the end of this. Simone and I have spoken. We are in the early, fragile stages of an honesty I'm not sure she was prepared for. Victor and I are in couples counseling, which is something I proposed, and he agreed to with the energy of someone who has been asked to take out the trash, but will do it to avoid a longer conversation. Whether that leads somewhere better, or whether it leads to me building a different kind of life, I genuinely don't know yet. I'm 54 and I had a stroke and I'm relearning things every day. How to trust my right hand. How to say what I need without apologizing for it. How to tell the difference between people who are present and people who are performing presence. Claudette and I walk every morning now when the weather allows. Down to the end of the block and back. Then down and because I'm building my stamina back up. And she says the fresh air is good for her too. She brings her dog, a small complicated animal named Edgar who has opinions about squirrels. We talk about everything and nothing. And sometimes we walk in comfortable silence, which is its own kind of company. I think about the hospital room sometimes. The particular quality of the light at 7 in the morning, when the day shift started and the hallway got louder, and I'd turn toward the door, half expecting to see someone there. 22 days of that turning, and that particular small hope and that empty doorway. I don't think about it the same way I used to. It's not grief anymore, exactly. It's more like information, like a thing I now know about the people in my life and about myself. What I was willing to accept for how long, and what it took to make me finally stop. I only have one question to leave you with, and I mean it genuinely. If the people who are supposed to show up for you only remember you exist when they need something, how long is too long to pretend that's enough? If you already know the answer, then you already know exactly where this story lives. This has been Mara Payback, a new story every single day.